Auntie Kath was staying a couple of nights while Finn got ready for his move to rehab. As always, I seemed to be the only one who didn't know she was coming. Maybe I would have been more on guard if I had. But I think Kylie's and my little spat was the last thing on Kath's mind. The bad start in the kitchen was forgotten once Kylie managed to stop bawling. "Go and have a shower, Kyles," Kath said to her. "Cool off a bit." That just left Auntie Kath and me in the kitchen. I glanced at the clock. Still half an hour till the bus left. "So, Tom, what's news?" "Not much," I replied, pouring milk over my Weet-Bix. "How's Finn?" You had to ask, even though the answer never really changed. "He's looking forward to getting out of hospital. I think rehab will be really good for him. Start to rebuild his..." "Yeah," I nodded, knowing she wasn't finished. "He'll have some independence there. That's why they like us carers to chuff off for a couple of days, let them adjust to their new environment." Every now and then, Kath glanced over at the door that linked the kitchen and the hallway together. "He'll know lots of fellas at rehab too. It's like a reunion for some of them." Slowly the realisation sunk into my thick skull. She was waiting for Mum to walk through the door. After a couple of days here, she'd learned that wasn't going to happen. "Finn's really looking forward to you going there, Tom. It's so much more relaxed than the hospital, and being in the wheelchair means he can get around and have..." I put my spoon down. Finn and wheelchairs. It zapped my appetite, just like that. Some freedom. He even wants to have his birthday there. A bit of a get-together, you and Kyle's. "Yeah?" I swallowed. Sticking pins in my eyeballs would have to be better than sitting around with Finn and his mates, trying to think of things to talk about, trying to find a safe place to look. With Daniel, I felt different. I mean, it was bad. It was all bad. But even after the worst visits, there was still some hope when you left him. Some hope in the realisation that one day Daniel would be getting out of there, a free man. But Finn would never be free, and that was too enormous to swallow. I understood it was one of the many injustices in this whole fuck-up of Daniel's. How could I not understand it? But the truth was, it was easier to be with Daniel, even where he was, than it was to be with Finn. With Finn, it was hardcore. Kylie came into the kitchen, her wet hair smelling of apples. "Here's the strudel recipe." She glared at me as she handed Auntie Kath a bit of paper. "Are you sure you don't mind making it?" "I'd love to," Kath answered. "You've saved me from Miss Dunsmore." Kylie draped her arms around Kath's shoulders, nestling her face into her neck. "Thanks." I couldn't even mouth crawler to her, because it wouldn't be true. Auntie Kath and Kylie were close, always had been. Kylie was born a few months after Uncle Roger, Kath's husband and Finn's father, died. Auntie Kath used to call Kylie the bundle of joy that helped find my smile. Some line like that. "When's home science, Kyles?" "Just before lunch. About 12 o'clock, I think. I'll make sure I get it to school by then." Auntie Kath had stopped checking the door every 5 seconds. "It'll be good for me, pottering around in the kitchen. Something different. I miss cooking." Kath was a top cook. She could make just about anything. Finn had the coolest birthday cakes. Footballs, cricket bats, anything he asked for. One year she made him a Ninja Turtle with red licorice straps for the mask. I remember thinking it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I reckon Auntie Kath made a big deal with Finn's cakes to make up for the fact his birthday was 10 days after Daniel's, and most of the family had had enough of birthdays by then. They say Christmas is the worst day of the year to have a birthday, but I reckon the week after Daniel's must run a close second. When I got home from school, Kath was still in the kitchen. Saucepans of her famous spaghetti sauce bubbled on the stove, making the kitchen smell the best it had in weeks. Plastic containers, some filled with food, some empty, were lined up along the table. Kath was down on her hands and knees, scrubbing the inside of the fridge like a possessed madwoman. "Hi, Auntie Kath." She looked up. Her face was red and sweaty. "Smells good," I said. Kath got up off the floor and chucked the cloth in the sink. "The fridge hasn't been cleaned in God knows how long. Half the food was covered in mould. I had to throw it all in the bin." "Oh?" Talk about a waste. She slammed the fridge shut and the contents rattled inside. "I don't know who's been doing the shopping." She began to furiously stir one of the saucepans. The spaghetti sauce spilt over the edge, leaving a mound of squashed tomatoes on the stovetop. She picked up the lid and slammed it back on. The air thickened with our silence. I stood there, staring at my shoes, wishing I'd had some late arvo activity that had kept me at school. Like usual, Kylie had gone to Brianna's and I was here alone. Gran walked in, and I was happy to see her. "Gran," I think I said in an overly chirpy way. "Hi." "Hello, Thomas," she replied with a strange look. "Good day at school, dear?" "Yeah, thanks." She took in the scene. "Oh, Kath, I thought Tess was going to help you." So did I. It was almost a snarl. Gran frowned and started fussing around with the empty containers on the table. "I wonder where she is." Kath glared at Gran. I'd never seen her look like that before. Her lips were drawn into one thin line and her hands began to twist the tea towel around and around her wrists. "Where do you reckon she is?" We were headed for something, and the next afternoon when Dad and I got back from footy training, we ran smack into it. Their voices hushed as they heard the screen door close behind us, but you could feel it. It was almost like a rumbling in the walls. Dad and I didn't say a thing. We didn't even look at each other. Slowly, he walked through the kitchen and down the hall. I followed, even though I knew where we were going. Brendan was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. Mum was way over the other side, curled up into a little ball. Gran and Kylie stood glued against the wall, while Auntie Kath paced up and down the floorboards. "What's going on?" Dad said at the doorway. "Brendan? What?" Brendan looked up. "Daniel," his voice croaked. "Daniel." "What?" "He called." "He called?" Dad said. "You know he's allowed those special calls from the unit." "Is he?" "He's fine." Now it was Gran speaking calmly. "He just wanted to speak to his—" She coughed. "His mother." But I answered the phone, Auntie Kath said, a weary tone in her voice. I could guess what was coming next. "And Daniel? Well, I guess I caught him off guard." "Off guard?" Mum suddenly sat up in bed. "He can't afford to be off guard in that place. Every second he has to watch his back." "Well, Tess," Kath started, "I'm sorry about that. But my son can't even turn his neck to see his back." No one moved. No one breathed. The silence rang in our ears. "Let's not go there," whispered Brendan. "Please." "No," Kath snorted. "We wouldn't want to upset Tess anymore, would we? Oh, my goodness, that'd be a disaster. She might never get out of bed then. She might decide to stay there forever." "Kath." Dad's voice cracked. I closed my eyes. "Kath, please." He managed to continue. "Come on. We don't want to do this. Remember, we decided that. It's not fair." "Fair?" Kath yelled. "Fair?" "You know what I mean," he answered. "Joe, why do you let her lie here wallowing?" Dad started to shake his head. "Why? Why should you and Mum and Brendan have to pick up all the pieces? She's his mother. She's their mother." Kath pointed at Kylie and me. "Hey, what about them? Where's her sense of responsibility to them?" "What am I meant to do?" Mum shrieked. "Get down on my hands and knees and— Well, at least that'd be doing something," Kath yelled. "It's not too late for that." "I can't help it." Mum's voice was shaking. I could feel my hands trembling behind my back. Kylie had hers pressed against her mouth. Some days I can't move, can't speak, can't do a thing. I can't afford such indulgence, Tess. I have no choice. I have to move. I have to speak." Kath took a deep breath. "Do you need to shit, Finn? Where's the pain, Finn? Why are you crying, Finn?" She stopped suddenly, turning, taking us all in. "Do you know I even have to wipe the tears off his face?" The rest of the week, we tiptoed around each other. So when it came to Mass on Sunday, I couldn't work out why Dad was making such a production of it. Surely we'd just slip in and slip out like we usually did. Dad walked into the bathroom with my good shirt, the one I'm forced to wear to weddings. "I'll give this a press," he told me. "Dad." I screwed up my face. "No way am I wearing that puffy shirt." He raised his eyebrows at me through the bathroom mirror. "No," I said again. "I'm not. We're just going to Mass. What's the deal?" Okay, Dad surrendered. "Then a t-shirt with a collar, just something nice." I shook my head. I could not work him out this morning. "It'll keep your grandmother quiet." "Is Gran coming?" Usually she went to the early service on her own, which suited me. "Why?" "We're all going, together, all of us." I walked out of the bathroom and there was Mum, showered, her hair washed and dressed. We had to take 2 cars. I was the sucker who had to go with the grandmother. I could feel Kylie's smirk as she watched Gran drive off with me in the passenger seat. I stared out the window. Gran's lecture on Palm Sunday and the deception of Jesus went in one ear and out the other. Mass was usually just under an hour. I timed it enough. But if the ancient priest who sometimes filled in for Father Vincent was there, then it'd be more like an hour and a half. He looked like a corpse on legs, and his sermons went on forever. Sometimes there were huge silences between words. Everyone would sit forward, wondering if he was going to finish his sentence, or, better still, keel over and die, giving us an early mark. I never understood what he was raving on about. As far as I was concerned, sermons were nap time. Gran marched straight to the front row. Soon Dad, Kylie and Mum were squeezing into the pew with us. Being Palm Sunday, the church seemed extra crowded. But we were in luck, as it was Father Vincent walking down the aisle. We'd definitely be out within the hour as long as there wasn't too much singing. I stood, sat, knelt, every now and then glancing over at Mum to check she was handling it. Dad was holding her hand. She seemed okay. Mum didn't take communion. Instead, she got down on her knees, buried her face in her hands, and prayed. Us Brennans had a lot to ask for and not much reason to give thanks. But I was thankful. Mum was up. Crazy, but I thought of those words when the men walked on the moon. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Because today, for my family, that's what it was like. Dom Finch, who played Breakaway, stood in the queue for communion. In front of him was his sister Virginia, who worked in the news agency. She was quite pretty in a gawky kind of way. Jimmy Rogers was behind Dom. He was the outside centre and seemed to have a pretty good set of legs on him. Apparently, he'd done some representative running for the Cog Hill athletics team. He gave me a wave and mouthed a yawn. I spotted Soup with about 6 brothers and sisters, all of them younger, running up and down the aisles. Rory told me no one expected Soup to get in the firsts, yet he was made hooker. He seemed okay in the scrum, but his line-out throws were crap. Matt had one of the most pinpoint throws around. He could show Soup a thing or two. Upstairs in the choir, a lone voice sang. As far as hymns go, it wasn't a bad one, and the girl singing was pretty good. Us lot down below would ruin the atmosphere with our assortment of flat tones. So we sat back, enjoying her voice, and, in my case, enjoying the fact I'd be out of here in 5 minutes, tops. I looked up and saw the chick with the good voice was Chrissy Tulake. Now I didn't want the singing to stop. I watched as she sang the last few lines. She had a sexy mouth, her lips were full, the top one sort of curling up, and she had the same white, straight teeth as Johnny. Her dark hair was hanging over one shoulder. Her boobs were big, not too big, just right for the shape of her body. She gave a little wave to a bloke down below, and I watched him wave back. Of course she was taken. She was a bloody goddess. The first official match of the comp was on the 19th of April, the first Thursday after Easter break. I was relieved it wasn't the Saturday because it was my turn to see Daniel, and clicking away in my brain was a birthday prezi idea for him. Something real special, something I knew he'd love. I went down to the sheds before school. Brendan was in the middle of his 200 sit-ups. 139, I heard him pant. 140. I sat on the doorstep outside his cabin, watching his face go from red to purple each time he heaved his chest to his knees. "Where were you this morning, slack ass?" he grunted. "Slept in." That was a lie. I just couldn't be bothered getting up. Instead, I lay in bed planning how I was going to get Daniel's prezi together by the weekend. It was my new mission. It felt good having my thoughts on something, especially something that was good for Daniel. It stopped my mind finding its way to the dark places it still liked to visit. I'd been running most days, so I was hardly being a slacker missing one morning's run. I had to be at the gate by 5:55 a.m. or Brendan would leave without me. A couple of times I had to sprint to catch up with him. Then he'd keep up at that pace to extend my suffering a bit more. "You need an alarm clock," Brendan said. "Then there's no excuse." "Yeah, right," I mumbled, giving my nuts a bit of a scratch through the boxes. "Anyway, you must have left earlier this morning." 162, he breathed. "Or were you the slack ass who didn't go to the top?" "Hey? It's not even 7 o'clock, I said, checking my watch. "We usually don't get back till now." 178, he puffed. "What are you, a bloody detective?" I felt something push against my back. "Eh?" I looked up and saw Johnny trying to open the door. "Sorry, Tom. Didn't see you there, mate." Johnny stepped over me, wearing a pair of boxers too. His were covered in Homer Simpson faces. "You all Simpsons fans?" I asked. Not that I cared. I just wanted to talk to detract from the cozy scene I'd found myself in. "I saw your sister's Bart slippers." Johnny smiled, his big white teeth glinting like a comic strip. "One of my favourite shows, The Simpsons." I sat there trying to act casual. I mean, I guess Johnny and Brendan were together. That made sense. Brendan? Remember Gran used to have those scrapbooks of Daniel and me playing footy? You know, articles and photos, stuff like that. "Yeah, I do," he nodded. "I think..." "Oh no, she hasn't burnt them or something, has she?" "No," he laughed. "They're probably still in the wardrobe in your room. I haven't seen them for a while. Check the bottom drawer." "I want to make one for Daniel, for his birthday." "A scrapbook? Okay." I watched Brendan nod as he took in my idea. "That could be good. Yeah." Johnny and him smiled at one another. "That could be really good." "I mean, I'll photocopy the clippings. I won't just hand it over to him. Grand scrapbook, that is. I want to make a new one. Make it really special. Giving something to, you know." "Yeah," cut in Brendan. "I might have some stuff you could use too." "You're a good brother, Tom," Johnny said. "It sounds real special." "Well, I think I'll go and have brekkie." Brendan didn't say anything, like, have brekkie here. A couple of times after our run, he'd made awesome omelettes with ham, cheese and mushrooms, but it didn't look like I was going to get them today, and that suited me. Okay, I got up and started back. Ahead, a blue wagon had stopped at the bottom gate leading to the sheds. The driver's door was opening. I signalled I'd open the gates and jogged over, but he was already getting out of the car. I mean, she. It was Chrissy Tulake. Her hair was tucked up in a baseball cap, her long brown legs showing through her shorts, that were certainly short. I felt the blood rush to my groin. How could I ever have mistaken her for a bloke? "Hi, Tom," she waved. "Hey," I swallowed. "How you doing?" "You're up early?" "Not really." Suddenly I felt like a prize jerk standing there in my racing car boxes. My hairless chest looked hollow and my skinny arms seemed to have grown longer, as if they were dangling around my knees like an ape. At least I'd kept a lid on the movement in my shorts. I saw she was eyeing them. I leaned against the gate. "Cute," she laughed. "Racing cars." I racked my brains for something to say, but my mind was blank except for the odd flash of her standing there with no clothes on. "I've got this stuff for Johnny. He's here, isn't he?" "Yeah." "Can you give him something for me?" "Sure." I went through the gate and followed her around to the back of the wagon. She leant into the boot, clanging things into a box. I tried not to perv at the back view, but it was bloody impossible not to. Chrissy tried to lift the box out of the boot. God, it's so heavy, she groaned. I got on the other side and we dragged it to the edge. A tiny drop of sweat had pooled in the top curl of her lip. I resisted the urge to wipe it. I was resisting a hell of a lot of urges. What's this stuff for? I asked her. Tools for some repair, I suppose. I told him I dropped them around this morning. Oh? Just put it in the entrance, she told me, pointing to the sheds. He'll find it. Sure. I wrestled my arms underneath the box. Will you be okay? I'm sure there was a smirk on her face. Maybe I should help you with it. No, I'm fine. I was going to bloody lift this box up if it killed me. I groaned a bit too loud as I picked it up. Sure? She giggled. My fingers were burning and my biceps felt like they were going to snap. At least they looked good. It's not too bad, I choked. Thanks, Tom, she said, closing the gates behind me. Yeah, bye. The box was so heavy I couldn't even turn my neck to have one last look at her. I was doing my best not to stagger, even though my knees were virtually knocking together. I took a deep breath and concentrated on keeping one foot in front of the other until I knew the wagon was out of sight. Then I dropped it, the tools spilling out all over the ground. I got back to the house and took a long hot shower until Kylie started banging on the door and I had to hurry things up. What were you doing in there? She said as I opened the door. You can't talk, I replied, trying not to look guilty. You spend the most time out of anyone in the bathroom. Do I need to disinfect? I smirked at her. I wish this house had another bathroom, she yelled. I sniffed my way to some clean boxes. Dad and Gran were doing most of the washing, and the rule was I had to put my dirty stuff outside the bedroom so Gran didn't have to pick it up off the floor. That suited me. I didn't want her snooping around in here anyway. I pulled the bottom drawer of the wardrobe open, and there they were, Gran's scrapbooks. I recognised the paper she'd covered them in, fluffy kittens playing with balls of red and yellow wool, a faded print of unicorns with flowing manes covering the oldest one. I flipped the top book open. The legend of the Brennan brothers was the page that fell open. I turned back a few pages. There was a photo of Dad and me together. The caption said, Tom Brennan with his father and Coach Joe. For the third consecutive year, Tom has been named player with the most potential. I closed the scrapbook and opened the next. Pasted in the front were 3 certificates. Daniel Brennan, best kicker, under 11s. Daniel Brennan, best and fairest, under 12s. Daniel Brennan, most tries scored, under 12s. This was exactly the sort of stuff I wanted. I pulled one from the bottom of the pile. This book wasn't covered and looked fairly new. I turned to the back. Nothing, so I opened the front cover. The whack came hard and fast and I wasn't prepared. Staring at me was the photo of Daniel's blue falcon up on its side, leaning against the tree. Football party tragedy, the ugly black words read. A party celebrating St John's Marist College's entry into the Wattle Shield Grand Final has ended in tragedy. 2 passengers were killed and a third suffered suspected spinal injuries when the car in which they were travelling hit a tree outside the old Scout Hall in Booker's Reserve. The driver of the car was reported to be a P-plate holder, allegedly with a blood alcohol reading of 0.12. The driver was not injured. The third passenger was transferred to the Royal Prince Charles Hospital in Arelon. All passengers were students of St John's Marist College.